The grooming gang's inquiry lurches from crisis to crisis. And we can speak now with Jim Gamble, the former policeman who resigned today from the running to be the inquiry's chair, and also GB News national reporter Charlie Peters. Jim Gamble, I think you're there for us now, sir. Jim Gamble, thank you for joining us. You've said in a letter today that you're tired of the political point scoring. You must be deeply disappointed to have to withdraw from this inquiry.
I am. I think there's been, misinformation, and I feel for the victims and survivors who feel yet again that they're stuck in the middle, and there's evidence that they're being pulled in different directions, and some of that is about misinformation, and some of it's about party political point scoring. I mean, you introduced me, as a former police officer, and of course I am. I'm former because I resigned 15 years ago in protest at what Theresa May was doing to the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre. In the 15 years since, I have been involved in a range of reviews which have called out the police in and across the UK, have highlighted failings in social care and elsewhere. And one of your reporters covering this not that long ago, when describing me as this former police officer, said that one of the problems was that I wouldn't understand modern slavery. I was in at the ground floor when we began to learn about modern slavery, to understand the impact of it, and to be able to align that with the human trafficking that takes place, not just internationally, but locally. And I held the Association of Chief Police Officers lead on these issues. So I think, everyone plays a part, and everyone needs to be responsible when they are pushing out information to, victims who are carrying this burden of pain, because misinformation actually misinforms and it leads to people making judgments on what they think is credible and factual information when actually it isn't.
Okay, Jim. Hi.
Jim Gamble, thank you. Charlie Peters with me now.
Yeah, Jim, I think you're referring to me when you're saying the reporter who made reference to modern slavery. Well, I was referring to a comment made to me by one of the survivors who interviewed you, and that was a concern they had shared based on conversation with you, saying his background is brilliant. And I did also share many of the positive comments that survivors engaging with you had heard, but said that they were worried about a lack of modern slavery knowledge. But I'm glad to have you put your expertise on the record on that here today. But perhaps there was a limited time to explain that background to the survivors, because of course we know that they had to submit their questions in advance, and not all survivors were able to attend that interview. Are you concerned, as many of them have said, that the process was stage managed and that you weren't afforded the opportunity to discuss your background more broadly?
I mean, look, thank you for that clarification. I really appreciate it. I think, yes, there are issues. I spoke to two victim and survivors panels, which is indicative, I think, of some of the problems that the Home Office are trying to manage, because different people come from different lived experiences and have different hopes, fears and expectations. I was totally unaware that they had to have their questions, proofed by someone. And in fact, I totally... I find that abhorrent. That shouldn't happen. These are people who are reflecting their lived experience. As I said to them at the time, if I had been successful, the first thing I would want to do is give them the opportunity to speak to me in groups if that's more comfortable. But actually, people need the opportunity sometimes to share some of the detail they have in private, in one-to-one. And so to me, it would have been stepping beyond the small groups that have been brought together for this purpose, into creating a network of survivors who are able to speak to and inform the chair and challenge the chair, because no two experiences are the same. And I was really, I was really disappointed that, some of the survivors, like Fiona Goddard, felt that she had to leave the process because she wasn't happy with it. And at the time, I couldn't reach out to her, which is what I would have wanted to do, because I didn't want to do anything that would have made the process inappropriate. But that's a person who has been really, really good in the way that they've been able to speak out. They've used their experience courageously. And I think she, for one, has demonstrated a generosity of spirit in the way she looks at it from both sides. So it was one of the things for me is if someone with my background in policing, which is undeniable, is going to be the predominant inhibitor for people like Fiona participating, then I don't want to inhibit that. I think this has got to be victim-centric. And I made a promise when I spoke to the survivors that if I couldn't get their complete trust, that I would step back. And I think I got a huge amount of trust from a majority, but not all. And when you're given the privilege of speaking to these young people who have the courage to come forward, who share their journey and the pain that's inflicted, then you need to be true to your word. And that's one of the reasons I've stood down. The party politics and the toxic atmosphere around it, is very much the context that's around it. And my goodness, if politicians can't come together cross-party on this, when are they ever going to come together?
And Jim Gamble, we've also heard the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, talking about how every institution in the country failed. And so it doesn't matter the background of the person that's selected in terms of that disqualifying them, because it's not just police officers and social workers who were involved in causing extreme suffering for these poor victims and survivors, but also judges, of course, who criminalised many of the victims, or courts that took their children away while they were fighting for justice. Do you think that's going to make it extremely difficult for any panel of survivors to adequately trust any appointed chair? And do you fear that this toxic environment you're referring to is going to seriously scupper that job hunt process?
Well, great point. I think the toxic environment, there needs to be a pause now. There needs to be a calming. Those people in positions of responsibility need to think about the victims and survivors rather than their own political point scoring. What I would say to you about occupation is this. You're absolutely right. There's none of us in the criminal justice system, in the social care system, in education, have covered ourselves in glory in the past. All of those sectors have been complicit in the harm that has taken place and in the cover-up, in the aftermath of it. But that doesn't mean every individual within every aspect. So I'm sure you can get a judge. I'm sure you can get the right police officer. I'm sure you can get someone with a social care background. Louise Casey is a social worker, and she's created this platform. But the judgment needs to be made on the basis of the individual's character, rather than their previous occupation. So what have they done? What can you measure by virtue of deed rather than the words that people will use to try and convince someone at the right time in the right place that they're the right person? Look at their career profile and their career history. From my point of view, I have challenged. I delivered the Child Q review. I challenged the Metropolitan Police around institutional racism. I challenged the West Midlands Police around the incompetence that I saw, and it's a public document, following the death of, Arthur Abinjo Hughes, a death I believe, if the police had done their job right, could have actually been averted. So you've got to look at the individuals and check, whether their words are supported by evidence of their deeds.
Well, Jim Gamble, thank you for joining us, and also Charlie Peters, our colleague there, our National News reporter. We've been in the studio at GB News. Westminster is leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, your reaction there from Jim Gamble, wanting to pause, take the politics out of it, do right by the victims.
Yeah, he argues very, very well. He argues very, very strongly, but I can understand the victims saying, look, we can't have police marking the homework of other police. We can't have social workers marking, the performance.
15 years ago, he says.
I know that, but that is how they feel. That the victims feel that and by the way, when you were on the Telegraph in 2014, I was up in, if you remember, I was up in Yorkshire, I was in Rotherham, and we were talking about this, I was talking about this. They just feel whoever chairs this needs to be genuinely independent. I wouldn't personally question Mr. Gamble's motivations or professionalism, but understand it from their perspective. I think also, the way they've been talked to in the run-up to this, they're very, very angry. In fact, Fiona Goddard will be joining me live on GB News at 7 o'clock to say why she thinks Jess Phillips, the Safeguarding Minister, should go.
Well, yeah, and hopefully they'll get to the end of it. You think it should be a judge or a foreign judge? A judge was ruled out by the PM today.
I think it has to be a judge. We have to trust that a judge is the right neutral person to do this. I'm also beginning to ask myself whether an inquiry is the right route. Nigel will have more experience than me, but after the banking crisis of '08, there was a parliamentary commission that actually forced Fred the Shred under subpoena laws to come to Parliament. There may be better ways of doing this.
OK. Good to see you here because you're on strike. We had a debate on the channel about why. You explain to listeners and viewers why you're on strike.
This Parliament is the most unrepresentative of where politics in the country is today and the arguments are today in the history of Parliament. So I have to sit through PMQs every week. I've got Ed Davey having a go at the member for Clacton, the Prime Minister accusing me of God knows what, and very often 4 or 5 mentions. And it doesn't matter what we do. Richard Tice bobs up and down to try and speak. I've tried bobbing up and down. We don't get called. I get 4 or 5 questions a year. I'm not going to sit there and have criticism coming from the PM and everybody else and not have a chance to respond. I'm treated like I'm a spectator, so in future I'll view it from the spectators' gallery.
Nigel Nelson, he's got a point, hasn't he?
I take the point. However, I do think, Nigel, as a party leader, part of that duty should be to be in the chamber of the House of Commons, not sitting up in the gallery.
Not if I can't respond.
Well, if the Speaker were to call you, he couldn't call you from up in the gallery.
He could, actually. The last time it happened was 1953. It's a long time ago.
It is unlikely, though, isn't it? Yeah.
Very.
I think
it's unlikely in the Commons.
Well, I know it's unlikely, but it might happen, in which case, as a party leader, the chamber is the right place for you to be.
I'm not going to be a punch bag for the leaders of the other parties with no chance to respond, period. I'm on strike from PMQs in the chamber.
You'll see the Speaker shortly, 2 days' time. Because he, of course, can call you away from the list, can't he? So maybe you might want to say, call me more often. But then guess what? The Greens complain. The Independent Palestinian grouping complains. The Lib Dems complain.
But they are not attacked. The point about parliamentary debate is people can say what they like. You must get the chance to respond. I can make a point of order at the end, but that's not the same thing. And they are not attacked by the Prime Minister every single week.
You've heard the Tories are saying you're literally on the sidelines now. The Tories are opposing the government in the chamber. You're watching with your pal Aaron Banks from above.
The Tories. Oh, I remember them. Yes.
Will it work?
They are irrelevant in the national debate. They might have prominence in PMQs because of what happened a year ago, but they are irrelevant in national debate. And unfortunately, the Commons reflects the last election, not where we are today.
Not where the polls are, but they move around. Nigel Nelson, we're talking about reform and his strike. It's working, isn't it?
Well, I still think that democracy is about elections rather than about the polls. I appreciate you're zooming up in the polls, got all that, but actually you should respond to the vote that's just been taken rather than one that might be taken in the future.
Fine, I've got other things to do then.
But as things stand, just for our viewers and listeners, your strike remains until you can get a question in PMQs.
I'm expecting a conversation with the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, and maybe we'll find a way around this. But unless I made my own very gentle protest, I couldn't really put this on the agenda. And hey, you know what? You're all talking about it.
Nigel Nelson, just finally, will it work?
No, I don't think it will work, and I'm sure we'll see you back in the chamber very shortly.
You won't.
Thank you to the team.